There's a rifle on Earth right now that, statistically speaking, 1 in every 60 human beings owns. It was designed by a wounded tank commander with no engineering degree, and almost 80 years later, it's still in production. More AK-47s exist than any other firearm in human history, between 75 and 100 million of them. And by far, it's the best one out there. And it all started in a Soviet hospital bed in 1941. Here's the story of how a wounded peasant from the Altai mountains designed the most copied weapon ever made and what he eventually had to say about it. So, Mikhail Kalashnikov was born in November 1919 in a small peasant village in the Altai mountains of southern Siberia. He was the 17th of 19 children his family farmed. So in 1938, this dude was conscripted into the Red Army. They looked at him and decided he was way too small to be an infantryman, so they sent him to a tank crew. So he learned tanks. By 1941, he was commanding a T-34, the main battle tank of Russia, somewhere on the Eastern Front, fighting the German advance, and he was 22 years old. So, in October of 1941, his tank was hit at the Battle of Bryansk, just west of Moscow. Kalashnikov was wounded badly in the shoulder, and the army sent him to a military hospital. He'd be out there for 6 months. So, while he was healing, he kept overhearing the same complaint from other wounded soldiers. The rifles they'd been issued just kept jamming. The Germans had better rifles. Everyone in the ward wanted better rifles. So, Kalashnikov decided that somebody needs to design a better rifle. And after much thought, he concluded that the somebody might as well just be him. You know, he had a problem, though. He had no engineering degree. So Kalashnikov was self-taught, just a mechanically curious tank mechanic from a peasant village. He started drawing designs anyway, learning the math as he went. And the Soviet military, surprisingly, decided to give him a workshop and let him try. So in 1945, with the war finally over, the Soviet military launched a competition. They wanted a new standard assault rifle for the entire Red Army. Designers from across the country sent in entries. The early rounds eliminated most of the entries, and by late 1947, the competition was down to 3 finalists, 2 professional engineers, and the tank mechanic with no degree. So between December 27, 1947, and January 11th of the next year, the 3 finalists tested their rifles at a Soviet Army range west of Moscow. So cold weather, mud, sand, a full battery of stress tests. The Bolkin design was the most accurate. The Dementiev design was the solid middle The Bolkin design was the most accurate. The Dementiev design was a solid middle option. The Kalashnikov design was frankly the least accurate, but it had one specific advantage. You could drop the Kalashnikov in mud, sand, freezing temperatures. You could forget it under a snowbank for a week. It would still fire. So the competition judges had a choice. A reliable rifle they could mass produce immediately, or a more accurate rifle that might be ready in a few more years. They picked the reliable one, the one they could actually start building. Kalashnikov's design won, and it was officially named the Automat Kalashnikova Model 1947, or in shorthand, the AK-47. The tank mechanic with no engineering degree had beaten 2 professional designers, and production began at a place called the Ishev's Machine Building Plant Number 74, now known to everyone as the Izmash Factory. By 1949, the AK-47 was officially adopted by the Soviet Armed Forces. The design philosophy was simple, deliberately. The fewer parts you have, the fewer parts can break. The simpler each part is, the easier it is to manufacture. The cheaper it is to make, so the more you can make. Once the Soviets had it, they did something interesting. They gave the design free of charge to every Warsaw Pact ally, then to every Soviet ally outside of the Warsaw Pact. During the Cold War, the AK spread to every place the Soviet Union wanted influence. Vietnam, North Korea, Cuba, Egypt, Angola, Mozambique, and dozens of others all over the world. And each country started building its own version. Some properly licensed, some quietly copied, some completely illegal. The total count of AK variants made worldwide became impossible to track. And here's why it spread so easily. As of 2014, the Russian government bought a current Kalashnikov rifle, the AK-103, for around $150 per rifle, a bargain by anyone's standards. The American M16, by comparison, cost the United States military around $647 a rifle, over 4 times more expensive per single unit. When you're equipping a national army, that math matters. When you're arming revolutionary movements, when you are equipping a national army, that math matters. When you are arming revolutionary movements abroad on a really limited budget, that math matters enormously. So the AK was cheap, available, simple option, and it worked. By the 1980s, the AK had become more than just a rifle. It had become a symbol of revolution, independence, of people fighting governments they did not want any longer. In 1983, the country of Mozambique adopted a new national flag. On it was a Kalashnikov rifle with bayonet attached, crossed over a farming hoe. Behind them, an open book. On top of all of it, a star. According to Mozambican constitution, the rifle represents defense, the hoe represents production, the book represents education, and the star represents international solidarity. All 4 together on a national flag. To this day, Mozambique is the only country on earth whose flag features a modern firearm. The AK-47, of all weapons that have ever existed, is the only one that has made the cut. So, how many AK-47s actually exist today? Even the people whose job it is to count them can't say for sure. The best estimates put the number somewhere between 75 and 100 million. That makes the AK-47 the most produced firearm in human history by a huge margin. The World Bank once estimated that there is, statistically speaking, 1 AK-47 for every roughly 60 humans being alive on Earth right now. Which brings us to a Russian Orthodox Church letter. In June of 2013, Mikhail Kalashnikov was 93 years old, in failing health and dying. He had been thinking a lot about what he'd build. So he wrote a letter to Patriarch Kirill, the head of the Russian Orthodox Church. The letter was by his standards deeply personal. It was also by his standards deeply pained. In the letter, Kalashnikov wrote, quote, "The pain in my soul is unbearable. I keep asking myself the same question. If my rifle took people's lives, am I responsible for those deaths?" He went further. He wrote that, given the chance, he would rather have invented something entirely different, something that helped farmers do their work, a simple machine, a lawnmower. The Patriarch wrote back. He told Kalashnikov he should not feel guilty. The rifle, he said, was a tool of defense. The Russian Orthodox Church supported the men who designed it and the men who used it. 6 months after he sent the letter, on December 23rd of 2013, Mikhail Kalashnikov died in the city of Ishevek. He was 94 years old. He'd outlived most of his... 6 months after he sent the letter, on December 23rd of 2013, Mikhail Kalashnikov died in the city of Ishevek. He was 94 years old. He had outlived most of his rivals from the original 1947 competition. The factory where he first built the rifle is still running. The original Izhmash factory in the small Russian city of Ishevek in the western Urals. Still makes Kalashnikov rifles today, almost 80 years later. Same brand, same city, same purpose. The current model is called the AK-12. It was officially adopted by the Russian military in 2018 after years of testing. A 2023 update is in mass production right now. In November of 2025, the Kalashnikov factory delivered its last AK-12 shipment of the year, on schedule to the Russian army. The same design philosophy in a slightly newer body. And underneath the upgraded body, it's still Kalashnikov's design. Same operating principles, same emphasis on simplicity, same emphasis on reliability in mud, sand, and freezing cold. The peasant from the Altai is still in there, 78 years after the December 1947 test at the Shergovsky range. The rifle is still in production, still cheap, still simple, still incredibly hard to break, still somehow recognized. 78 years after the December 1947 test trials at the Shergovsky range, the rifle is still in production, still cheap, still simple, still incredibly hard to break, still somehow recognizably the same design. 75 to 100 million of them still in the world, on every continent, except Antarctica, and dozens of armies on one national flag, and thousands of conflicts designed by a peasant who was wounded in a tank battle, built by a factory in a small industrial city in the Russian Urals, adopted by a country, the Soviet Union, that no longer technically exists. And yet, almost 8 decades later, the AK-47 is still being manufactured, still being copied, still in the hands of soldiers, fighters, and civilians on every populated continent on Earth. It refuses to go away. Mikhail Kalashnikov died wishing he had built a lawnmower instead. He didn't. He built the most copied weapon in human history. Some things once invented simply can't be uninvented. Make sure to like and subscribe.